Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we are joined by Scott Anderson. Excited for him to share a little bit about his journey between marketing agencies and equipment providers, kind of all over the board. So a good journey, good perspective, and excited for him to share. So without further ado, Scott, you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Thanks, Liam. Really glad to be here. Yeah, I guess serial entrepreneur is pretty descriptive. I've been starting companies and running companies for a long time, actually since I was a little kid, and I'm now on company number 9, and I believe that's right, and have the scars to prove it. There's a lot of entrepreneurship and startups and so forth that is not for the faint of heart, of course, but and most recently, I've been coaching executives and entrepreneurs mainly, and specifically through burnout and how to recover from burnout.
Awesome. Were each of your businesses raging success, or did you have kind of varying degrees of, success and learning along the way?
Yeah, success and learning. That's a nice euphemism. I had. I think everything is kind of a mixed bag, really. Looking back on things, there's always things that I wish that I would have done differently or would have turned out differently. But yeah, there's certainly been some big successes. There have been some abject failures as well. One of the ones that I remember the most, and it that I had high hopes for, but which was a colossal crater, was a car detailing model that I had developed based on a business in your hometown or home stomping grounds in Ventura County. The model was based for a Southern California business, but I was executing it in the Midwest, and didn't work. Let's just say it didn't work, and a lot of lessons learned there, and as I say, the scars to prove it. But overall, I've been very fortunate, and mainly because I've had great teams.
Importance of people, right? Always comes down to being a big impact influence, right? On how quickly
Absolutely.
that success can come, right? And just avoiding bad people, right, is probably equally as important. Um, so question we like to ask, right, is once you hit that point of profitability in your, first or second or third business, didn't have to worry about food on the table, roof over the head, and you had, extra cash to be able to play with, so to speak. What did you choose to, invest, and how did you spend your cash in those early days?
And we talked a little bit before the show. The best investments were those that had the greatest ROI and were overall the most successful. Were reinvesting into either the business that I was running or businesses that I had control over. That was the best investments overall. Um, I mean, in terms of cash on cash return, the best investments were to reinvest in mainly the people, and because most of the businesses that I've been in have been really people and service industries, and so investing in people has been by far the best return. The second best return is really investing in coaches and consultants, for me personally and for my businesses. Um, that has been, not only the most, it's been extremely rewarding and helped me the most, but I also think in terms of ROI have been the best returns. But generally, to be investing in the things that I'm actually working on and that I can control in some way or another have been the best investments, um,
Scott,
overall. Yeah.
were those intentional reinvestments at the beginning, or were those just sort of natural? That's what you were doing, and it made sense, and that's where the money went because that's what you were growing.
Well, I think a little bit of both, but it was clear to me that one of the breaks that most entrepreneurs make at some point in their lives, either from birth or at some point in their careers, is realizing um, that the most security that there is, and for risk tolerant people, security is not necessarily the most important thing, but the most secure investments I could make, the ones that I had the most confidence in, were investing in my own businesses. And so part of it was natural, and part of it was just the overall, over time, the aha that really that is the best investment, that I really can get the best return out of investing in my own businesses, but in particular by investing in my teammates and in bringing on new teammates.
Well, at what point in the business, right, was there a certain target goal where, reinvesting all the money into the business versus taking it out and putting it, whether it's 401k, stock market, real estate,
Right.
some other source, right? Like, how did that, I'm sure you eventually got to a point where it was like, the returns are marginal and reinvesting back into the business, right? How did you set and acknowledge when that point came to, make a shift accordingly?
Well, yeah, and there's certainly lots of investments competing for an entrepreneur's attention, and it depends on the time period. At sometimes real estate can outperform reinvesting, or outperform the marginal returns in your own business. Other times the stock market. Lately there have, and I've steered away from this personally, but I've certainly got lots and lots of clients who are investing in cryptocurrency, finding it to be the most, the best alternative all the way around, just in terms of the potential return on investment. So, I mean, I think that's part of it, is just what is actually bearing the highest returns at any one time. During the from 2000 on, the gains that you could make in the stock market were slow and grinding at times. And not surprisingly, I looked at other things, and a lot of my clients have looked at other things as alternatives. Certainly, real estate, multifamily in particular, has been something that I've looked at, and a number of my clients have looked at, and have turned out to be, a good solid investment, if only from a tax perspective. It's always been real estate and income producing, like multifamily has been a really good place for investors, from not only from a upside perspective, but also from a tax shelter perspective. And so I've spent some money there, invested some money there, as well as, and a number of my clients have as well.
So what was, as you're thinking about the strategic decisions, right? Like, at what point, like, how did you evaluate those marginal returns to say, to even get to the point where it was like, okay, now I should be looking at something else, and whether it's crypto or multifamily, right, to go into those things? What was that switch for you in terms of, put it into the business versus take it out? And kind of how did you
Right.
think about that?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is when you begin to experience marginal returns, or in other words, there is, you've run a business to a point where it's performing as well as it can, and where the returns are only marginal, and only and not very attractive as compared to the other options. That's one of the main reasons that there simply are better returns elsewhere. A lot of it also has to do with, if you're raising a family, and I have 4 children, you're trying to put through college and so forth. A lot of it depends on, that's the investment. If you have children anyway, that's the investment, investing in their futures, or trying to support them as they make that investment. And not maybe from a dollar's perspective, but mainly from a wanting to do what's best for your children perspective. I find that a lot of people, once they start having children, the investment filter changes dramatically. And so then there's that piece, and then there's the various tiers that happen as children start leaving the nest and start getting through college. Then it introduces a whole new ability and a different investment criteria completely. So a lot of it has to do with just life, where you are in your life. I think that makes the biggest difference. When we were running our advertising agency, one of the things that I noticed was that when I started it, and I was just getting married and I had no children, I had a completely different perspective on risk, and and also on the need for return. I was willing to invest and invest and invest. But as children started to crop up all over the place, it was necessary to look at net income and at ROI on the agency, and investing in it became tempered by how much money it had to actually generate for it to make sense. So I think life the stage in your life is really one of the biggest determinants there.
So as you look back, and we've got a lot of listeners, right, who are entrepreneurs, sole proprietors, who are going through this point where they're starting to reach profitability, right? Is there any advice or things that you would do differently, right, or counsel, right, as a lot of people are going through, burnout, particularly on those early stages, right, where hey, maybe there's no wife or no kids yet, right, and that risk and the amount of you're willing to put in is different, right?
Sure.
To set them up for the long-term success, right, to be able to get to where you've gotten in your life and your career.
I really think the key is, and I did a pretty good job of investing and essentially saving money from a pretty young age. But I really think that's the single smartest thing that anybody can do, is to live within your means and to be saving money as soon as you possibly can. And the tendency, unfortunately, for a lot of people who are making good money for the first time, is to spend it on things that don't ultimately have much value, a big house or cars or whatever. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, so everybody in Omaha can quote Warren Buffett, I think, and the philosophies of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And so a lot of what I take as my own philosophy comes right out of the Berkshire Hathaway handbook. But it really does have to do with being conservative in lifestyle and in saving, consistently saving over time, and really let cost averaging, that old-fashioned idea, but let cost averaging, really cost basis averaging, do its work for you. Let compounding do its work for you. Whatever it is you're investing in, whether it's currency, the stock market, multifamily, crypto, whatever it is, but let compounding work for you. That's I guess one of the things. A part of my life that I regret, although I think it's fairly typical, is in the I'll call it the 30s, where I wasn't aware of it as I was doing it, but in retrospect, I was keeping up with the Joneses, or keeping up with my peers in terms of things, and that was really wasted money, and just a whole wasted enterprise. So if I had it to do over again, I would have been much better off living in a more sensible, conservative way, saving the money, and spending it now on trips to Europe or something, versus appearance.
Was there one thing you bought on the appearance or keeping up with the Joneses that is stuck with you over the years? Like, that's the one. That was the one that was too lavish for me.
It's so funny. Warren Buffett bought his first plane, or maybe it's still his plane, and he named it the Indefensible. And I always thought that was a great thing, because he just thought it was outrageously, I don't know, grandiose or something to own a jet. And sadly, I've never had any jets in my life, but there have been a couple of things that I bought that I thought, oh man, this really doesn't. I once bought a BMW, essentially a race car, that was just fun as hell, scared me to death. I got a huge speeding ticket the first hour I owned it, and in retrospect, I mean, have fun for sure. Have fun. Life is short. But in retrospect, my motivation wasn't as much have fun as look good. And I didn't see it at the time, but it's glaring now. My 30-year-old self is a bit of embarrassment to me.
It's funny, as I've progressed and look back, there's still ways to have fun, and you can go rent those cars for $1,000, $2,000 a day, and it's
That's right. That's right.
It gives you what you need. But
Exactly.
the other point I'd love for you to touch on, given your expertise, right, is, how do you couple that desire, right, to keep up with the Joneses, and as we're talking about investing and saving and taking advantage of compounding, with burnout, right, and all the pressures that an entrepreneur has with running the business, right? Like, how do you blend those two things together, and kind of what advice do you have on, staving off burnout and, setting yourself up for
Sure.
success?
I think the most important thing, really, and this goes back to investing in your company and in investing in yourself. I mean, the smartest investments, the most valuable investments I made, thinking back, have been in engaging coaches I'm thinking of a couple in particular that really saved me from making some horrendous mistakes. I made a number all by myself, but that really helped me. The problem is that it kind of is lonely at the top, and it tends to be an echo chamber, and there aren't very many people who will tell you the truth. And in my arrogance, in my 30s in particular, I probably wouldn't have listened to anybody anyway. So, I think one of the best ways to not only succeed with your business and investing in whatever you invest in, but also to stave off burnout, is to have a coach, to have, or a mentor or a sounding board of some kind, somebody who you will listen to. And I was very fortunate to have great coaches starting in my 30s that really saved me from making bigger mistakes than I might have made on my own. But particularly as time goes on, have helped prevent burnout, because it's just the way I'm wired and the way that most entrepreneurs are wired, is a profile that says, really nothing's impossible. And there's a certain competitiveness and ambition and perfectionism that all wrapped together can produce some wonderful things, but which ultimately can have diminishing returns also, in the form of exhaustion, dissatisfaction, isolation from your peers. This is one of the things that happened to me. Was I really started to isolate myself more and more from my partners, and it really backfired. But I wasn't aware that I was doing it. As I was going through my own burnout, that's the biggest, it's the combination of exhaustion, isolation, and disconnection, even from the work that you were so passionate about, and ultimately kind of a resentment towards the work itself. So burnout can be very, very dangerous. Fortunately, it's really preventable and recoverable, but it's incredibly dangerous. I'd say it's probably the single most dangerous thing that can happen with an entrepreneur. But because it's lonely at the top, who do you report any of this to? Who do you report feeling like an imposter to? There aren't many people to confide in. So coaches are great. Mastermind groups like EO or YPO are also excellent in this respect. We have a mastermind within our Burnout Breakthrough program that's specifically designed for that. But it's all meant to build or to break down the feelings of uniqueness and certain amount of ego, and just the isolation that naturally comes with burnout.
You talk about coaches. You use the plural, right? So are you using different coaches to solve different things in terms of business coach or sales coach or life coach or spiritual coach? Like, how do you think about, the type of coach and finding the right coach
Sure.
for the given situation?
Yeah, I didn't approach it that way. I didn't necessarily have coaches for different things. We had consultants maybe for different areas of the business, but I had one coach that was sort of who I invested my confidence and my faith in a holistic way. That's what I was after in particular. Someone who could understand my entrepreneurialness, but could understand me in 360 degrees. And that's the kind of coaching that I provide. In fact, for my own clients, both with respect to burnout and general entrepreneur coaching, is to really understand the whole package. Because the problem with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I was guilty of this, is to try to compartmentalize work as something that's distinct from home, that's distinct from community or spiritual life or whatever. And it's the compartmentalization of it, I found, that can actually lead to a lot of problems. The idea that what I do at work is a very separate thing than the rest of me, the rest of my life. So in my case, it's been I discovered a coach in my 30s who was just incredibly effective and useful for me at that time. And I've engaged a series of coaches one at a time that I've used each one in a holistic way. For me, that's what's worked best. But I coach people where I'm the entrepreneur coach, and they also have a health coach or a fitness coach, for example. Got a number of clients who are running marathons and climbing mountains and so forth, and have a coach just for that purpose.
As we talk about, you brought up consultants, right? We've talked about coaches, right? There's also this concept of board of advisors, right? And whether they're paid, unpaid, right? Sounding board. What's the ideal structure in your mind of how to use those, right? Because those three parties all offer different things that, there's huge overlap between a lot of them.
Right.
How do you think about, who to use for what and how to structure it so that, you're getting the most out of, each engagement and you're not, having marginal returns paying for, multiple parties as you're trying to solve,
Yeah.
multiple things.
And everyone is different. But the danger is, for people like me, for type A entrepreneurs that are sure they're right most of the time, having multiple sounding boards can be distracting and can be confusing. Also, there's a tendency for entrepreneurs to go to whoever it is that'll give them the answer they want. So, in my view, it's best to focus on one of those options, whether it's a consultant or a coach or or a board of advisors. And if you're hiring a consultant for a very narrow sort of a responsibility, let's say for, I don't know, sales training or coaching, I'm picking something at random, that isn't necessarily a conflict. But if what you're looking for as an entrepreneur is someone to really help you make some really important decisions, mind, body, and spirit, and business, then I think it's probably one to pick one approach or the other. I've served on a number of board of advisors and board of directors, and it can be a very effective technique. But what I found, again, is that, and what that offers a board of advisors or board of directors, obviously, is a diversity of point of views, which is inherently, I think, a good thing to get a wide range of perspectives. But at least for me, I would select either a coach or a mentor or a board of advisors or a board of directors and really lean on them, rather than shop my questions to a wide variety of people, and potentially confusing myself. One of the keys I found is to allow yourself to be very vulnerable and candid and in an open book. That's the best return on investment, regardless if it's a board of advisors or an individual coach.
That makes sense. um, the key takeaway from it's something that I'm thinking through myself for our own business, right? And I think the key that I'm hearing you articulate, right, is you've got to have a defined focus for each particular group, right? And I
A
think,
goal, I think, to have a goal in mind.
yeah,
Even if the goal is just to get clear about what the goal should be,
mhm,
it's really important to start with an objective.
that makes sense. As we're wrapping up here, Scott, what any last words of advice, or what's the way that our listeners can connect back with you?
Well, I mentioned our burnout program, and this is a combination of training, a mastermind group, and individual coaching, sort of a hybrid of all the things we've talked about. And we have found that this is a really effective, proven effective way over the last 5 years for entrepreneurs to recover from burnout, prevent it from ever coming back, and also bring principles into their companies to ensure that their teams have tools. The biggest challenge my clients have right now is workforce, and retaining the best talent and recruiting the best talent. And burnout is really the number one reason for the Great Resignation. So if anybody's interested in finding more about that, you should go to burnoutbreakthrough.com. And there are a number of resources there and a free training that may be helpful.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your time today, Scott. Appreciate
Thank
the
you,
insights.
Liam.